My name is Beth Schmidt, and I'm 26 years old.
And how are you working to solve today's problems? Basically, what is your story?
So essentially, I started teaching 10th grade English at Locke High School in South Central Los Angeles with Teach for America. And one of the main issues I witnessed when I was teaching there was the lack of resources that my students had. So a lot of my students came to me. They had specific passions they wanted to pursue, but they really had no way of pursuing them. And Locke didn't really have a lot of extracurricular activities anyway. So I created Wishbone.org, which essentially strives to bring opportunity to at-risk high school students through direct sponsorship of their programs, so out-of-school programs. And how it works is that donors can log on and see a student and read about his or her passion and fund the student's posted program wish either partially or fully.
How long has this been going?
I started it, I finished teaching I taught from 2007 to 2009, and then after I finished teaching, I moved up to San Francisco to launch it. So it's been, it was officially incorporated this August, but it's been, a year of work. So it's been really exciting, and the test model for Wishbone was launched actually while I was teaching. I sent 7 students on out-of-school programs to really analyze whether or not this would be a deal breaker for students and whether or not it would, really sort of launch their passion and what it would do for them if they would stay in high school, if they would go on to a professional or collegiate environment. And for those 7, it did. 7 out of 7 stayed in high school, and all 7 went on to either a 2-year or 4-year college to then pursue what they had pursued in their program experience. So that was really exciting.
Great. A lot of what we're doing with the coalition is going to be working across traditional boundaries and bringing together people who don't usually speak with each other for constructive dialogue. How have you worked across traditional boundaries in your work, in any sense?
Sure, absolutely. I think my model is really interesting because it links, students with donors. So it's been a really interesting piece to not only work with schools and create school partnerships, but also then create partnerships in foundations and corporations, and then beyond that, also create the partnerships with programs. And I've been blending all of those 3 together, which has been really interesting. But, in terms of traditional partnerships and traditional boundaries, like you say, I think I've run into quite a few roadblocks along the way in terms of, working through traditional boundaries or the traditional way of how things should be done in the nonprofit world. And I think what I've realized is that, there's not really a right way to launch your passion. And thinking there's a right way to launch your passion is really not a positive cycle to get into. So, I think the one thing throughout all of these traditional boundaries that I've crossed, I keep going back to is, to believe in what I do know and what I can rely on, which is my experience teaching in South Central and the need for out-of-school programs for youth. So, throughout all the challenges and throughout all of those boundaries, I keep going back to that same notion of, okay, this is, my passion, and I know I can believe in this. This I know is true. So looking for the right way to navigate through the red tape, doesn't really discourage me as much if I can go back to that notion.
Great. So what inspired you to take action in the first place? Was there a moment you decided that Wishbone had to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I was an English teacher, and, I just had so many students writing essays on their passions. And one of the assignments I gave my students was to write, if they could go pursue anything in the world, it was sort of like a quick write assignment, what would it be? And I was just shocked at what students had in mind, not just general interests, but really specific interests within their community. So, I had one student who had been dying to go study stem cell science, and there was nothing at Locke High School that offered, any sort of course on that. And not only did the student know of a program at UCLA, but had been researching it online, and I was just really blown away by the specific interests that my students had and how aware they were of what existed out there, and also how aware they were of the fact that they didn't have access to those things. So I think that was the moment when I said, wow, I'm shocked that, a 10th grader really has the, the ability and the desire to go pursue a program out of school, and I have to make it happen.
Yeah, that's a really actually inspiring story. So you've touched on this next one a little bit, but what are the challenges you see facing young people today?
Well, I think in general, youth today, I think, students, especially in low-income communities, just don't succeed in college or in a professional experience because they haven't been exposed to opportunities, period. So when they're not exposed to opportunities outside of their environment, it's really hard to build confidence and a skill set to engage within their greater community. So I have seen a lot of students who really just lack the confidence and just don't have the knowledge to go past their community because it's scary and they've never been. So, I think the biggest thing that is lacking for our youth is that building block to provide students with some sort of experience to really push them to the next level. I saw a lot of my students really not understand why English class mattered, and then doing a program and seeing, oh, well, I have to stay in high school, I have to graduate to be able to, study stem cell science eventually in college to be, a doctor or whatever it takes. Then all of a sudden there's this rationale to do well in high school that wasn't there before. So again, I think it's exposure that's a really big challenge for youth today.
And following up, what advice do you have for young people who are interested in becoming more involved in their communities, youth issues, political process, anything?
I would say get involved. I would always tell my students even, start small. Even if it's just volunteering on a local level, that can expose them to an issue that's most likely prevalent beyond their community. And then that gives them the opportunity to really become inspired and allow themselves to become involved and invested on a greater level. I had one student who would just go and volunteer, 2 days a week with underserved youth who were in elementary school, and she was a high schooler. And, just that even opened her eyes to a lot of different issues that she then really became invested in, like literacy and some things like that. So I think just, some students feel like they can't really make a dent if they can't do it on a great level, but my advice would be to get started in any way that seems meaningful to them, even if it's small.